What is cracking, everyone? We got a very, very special guest with us. The GOAT has returned. Jordan Elliott of Niners Nation, staff writer, doing all the good stuff over there. How you doing, my guy?
Oh, it's good, man. It's good to be back. It's been a nice little break from football. I'm not gonna lie, but always happy to come on and talk with you.
Of course, man. It's good to have you. I figured what we could do today is talk about expectations that we have with training camp less than a month away. Like we're really close to getting football back. So I'm really, really excited to get things kicked up in the right direction. But just wanted to talk about expectations with the 49ers and from an overall perspective, maybe more kind of a generalized record kind of situation. What do you expect with the 49ers? Again, looking in the division, looking at them playing the AFC West and the stacked division that they are. What is your just kind of overall expectations for the 49ers as they move into this season?
I think they're a playoff team. I think that they have a roster that's strong enough that I think they should be somewhere around, between 9 or 11 wins. And that window is where I would project them to be. I think Trey Lance is going to be a good NFL quarterback. I think he has all the tools. I think he has the mental ability, but I also think it's really hard to step in from day one and be an above average NFL quarterback. So I think that there's going to be some growing pains, at least with consistency. I don't expect, Trey to go out and have 17 weeks of flawless football. Like there's going to be some bumps in the road. But I think the roster around them is strong enough that they can absorb some of the growing pains that usually teams with young quarterbacks don't have the luxury of being able to do. So I think they're going to be 9, 11 wins, somewhere in that range. I would say, like, if I had to guess right now, I'd probably say 10-7, maybe 11-6, depending on how things check out. But they have a tough schedule, and, it's hard to get to double-digit wins in the NFL. I think it's so funny that 49ers have been to 2 NFC championship games in the last 3 seasons, and like that's like the expectation almost, when it's not like that's really hard to do. And I think it's so funny that that's where people are like, so they're like, well, they went to the NFC championship game last year, so anything less of that's a failure. Unfortunately, that's not how it works in the NFL. If you win 10 games, it's a pretty successful season. I think the 49ers are capable of doing it.
Absolutely. We have 49er fans have high expectations, and they're a little bit spoiled because we expect greatness from this team. And, for all the crap that, Jimmy Garoppolo does get, he did lead the 49ers or help lead the 49ers to 2 NFC championship games in 2 years. Obviously not the outcomes in the Super Bowl or able to get to the Super Bowl that we wanted to last year. But when you look at the kind of rookie that's going to be coming in, I think there is an expectation that right away the 49ers are just going to be right back at that 12-13 win margin. And it could happen. But I think tempering expectations is kind of like what you're getting at, is just like, let's maybe just take it maybe week by week. We figure out some of the unknowns that are about to basically be with the 49ers. There's a lot of unknowns off the line. A little bit of question mark there, obviously a new quarterback. So we don't necessarily know, right, what's going to be coming down the pipe here in 2022.
Yeah, and I mean, the biggest thing too is that, like, again, like I think Trey Lance is going to be good. I've been pretty, vocal that I think he's going to be a good quarterback but like before he was drafted, before he's on the 49ers. Like, he has traits. He's a smart guy. We have to think about like the system and the like ideal outcome, it feels like, for these games for Kyle Shanahan. Like, Kyle doesn't want to have Trey Lance throw the ball 40 times a game. Like, that's not where they're going in game planning, going into these games. Like, that's not where their mindset's at. And I've seen some pretty lofty expectations from some people where they're throwing out there that Lance is, like people talking about him on like the MVP conversation and, stuff like that, where it's like, I don't think that that's like the 49ers desired outcome. Like, sure, hey, if they get a Patrick Mahomes kind of season from Trey Lance, like nobody's going to complain about it. But I don't think there's anything wrong if he's going into a game and he's, 17-25 for 220 and a touchdown, and the 49ers are running the ball 35 times a game. Like, to me, that's where I think Kyle Shanahan wants to be at. And as much as I think Trey Lance has the capability to work outside of structure, and maybe some of these plays where Kyle Shanahan's play calling isn't, completely getting guys open and opening things up downfield, he has the ability to improvise. But I don't think that the 49ers are just going to have this massive shift in philosophy where they're going to start coming out, going empty, coming out 3-4 wide receiver sets and just throwing the ball 40 times a game. Like, I definitely think that Trey Lance needs to be measured with the eye test. I think this is true for anything, but like especially in this case, like you need to measure these performances with the eye test, because again, there's people out there that would say, like, if I throw out that stat line again, like 220, a pick and a touchdown, like that might be all the 49ers need to win a football game, and that's ultimately what matters. And I think that there's going to be a lot of very funny, I don't know, like judgment from people that are clearly biased one way or another when it comes to Trey Lance. And I don't think he needs to be this like superstar that people are expecting for the 49ers to be successful.
I've talked a lot about the kind of 2011 San Francisco 49ers. I like just referencing back to them because when we go back the first year of Jim Harbaugh taking over, again, there's a lot of different kind of circumstances. The roster was established. You had Alex Smith, who had been there for quite some time, hadn't really lived up to the expectations of being, the high draft pick that he was. But with Harbaugh coming in, he was able to rely on elite defense, elite special teams. Again, the Tony Montana squad, you had Akers out there breaking records, and you had Frank Gore, a legitimate offensive line, and a team that was run heavy, right? They didn't win 13. They didn't go 13-3 on the arm of Alex Smith. They went that far with elite defense and essentially running the football and just not turning the ball over. So, do you see some similarities with that kind of overarching theme with what this team could be this year? Again, heavy emphasis on running the football. The 49ers drafted TDP. You get Elijah Mitchell going into year 2, a healthy Jeff Wilson. We've heard good things about Jordan Mason. What's going to be Trey Sermon, Hasty? What's that going to look like? Would you it sounds like you believe too that they're going to keep running the rock and keep setting the tone with the run game, at least on the offensive side of things.
Yeah, like, football is obviously much more nuanced and complex than what I'm about to say. So I don't want people to like take away from this that this is how I think universally. But I really think that a lot of times football can be overthought. And if you have a team that is in the playoffs, so you obviously have to get there first. That's one thing that I think makes the NFL so unique, is that the regular season is so much more valuable than the NBA, MLB, even the NHL, like all these other pro sports leagues. These regular season games are heavily weighted. But as we saw last year with the 49ers, getting in as the wild card team, like if you get in, anything can happen. And once you get in, it's historically been proven, if you can rush the passer and you can run the football effectively, you're going to have a chance to beat anybody. And we've seen teams that are superior, if we're looking at it from a roster standpoint, lose to maybe a lesser talented team based on their ability to do those things. And no matter what happens really at the quarterback position, if we isolate that and put that to the side, the 49ers have one of the deepest defensive lines in the league, and they have an explosive running attack that's being designed by one of the most creative run designers the NFL has ever seen. So I think, yeah, like, hey, even if they win 10 games, like they could go on a run and win some games. They've shown they can go on the road in the playoffs. They're battle tested. They went into Lambeau. They went into Dallas. They almost went into LA. Like, they have the ability to do that. And I don't think this is just like a scenario where you necessarily need to have a 14-win season and lock down the 1 seed and have all these playoff games at Levi's. Like, no, this team is built to travel when January and February come around. And I think that obviously the main focus needs to be getting there, but they have the tools to be that team that could make that surprise run. Nobody had the Bengals in the Super Bowl last year, but if you have the right pieces coming together at the right time, anything is possible. And I think the 49ers not only have that, they also have the experience of coming darn close to doing it the last couple of years.
Absolutely. And obviously, we understand a huge talking point amongst 49er fans, analysts, is that offensive line. Alex Mack retired, did not return. You have Laken Tomlinson get the bag with the Jets. And as it seems to have come to fruition, or at least it's still developing, feels like Aaron Banks will be there at left guard and Jake Brendel potentially will be the center heading into at least training camp. What are your expectations for this offensive line this year? Obviously, some uncertainties, at least around the group as we head into training camp.
I mean, I'm not super discouraged or anything. Like, I don't think they're as bad as maybe some people are projecting them to be, or my level of concern wouldn't be there. I think anytime you have Trent Williams on your offensive line, it automatically catapults you into one of the better offensive line units in the league. And I know that's only 1 out of 5 guys, but he is that good. He makes that much of an impact on the left side. Mike Mcglinchey, we haven't heard, I think it's kind of like a no news is good news type of situation. We haven't heard any like setbacks or anything really that would make you think that his recovery isn't going according to plan. And again, we've both said for a long time, like Mcglinchey is a very, very good right tackle, and he's a guy that gets so much unwarranted hate. Is really one of the best run blocking tackles in the entire league. And I thought he got better in pass protection too. And he's a guy where I think some of those shortcomings that people seem to point at in pass protection are very amplified. And it's not necessarily that it's a high number of plays where it's happening. It just will happen in a fourth down, or it'll happen in a 2-minute draw. Like, I think it makes it appear like there's a much bigger issue. He's a much better player than he gets credit for. And Daniel Brunskill is too. Daniel Brunskill is a really good player, and he has the ability where maybe he plays a little bit of center. Maybe they keep him at right guard. You have Banks at left guard. And I think Banks is going to be really good too. I've thought for the last year and a half or so that, like, until we really see him on the field, we can't sit here and call him a bust. And I understand people were a little put off by the fact that he didn't start last year, but Daniel Brunskill, again, is a very good player. Laken Tomlinson's a very good player. Like, it's not like there was just this, massive hole on the offensive line that was up for grabs and Banks couldn't take it. He was just stuck behind two very good, proven veteran offensive linemen, and I think he has a chance to step in. So, am I going into this thinking they're the strongest unit on the team? Absolutely not. But I don't think that they're a liability in any sense. I think they'll be fine.
Do you think there's an opportunity? I think when we obviously look at the offensive line, they work in unit. They work as units. They work in tandem a lot, especially in the zone scheme. Do you see an opportunity where they can still be in that top 15 category and maybe even excel further? Because again, you mentioned they're anchored by the GOAT, Trent Williams. And yes, there's uncertainty there with Aaron Banks, what he'll be, Jake Brendel, but knowing what we know about the zone scheme outside and mid zone, there's a lot of double teams that occur with that center guard combo. So they're not necessarily always on an island. So do you think maybe, because I think with Mike Mcglinchey last year before he went out, and you might have better insight on this, but they were a top 5 unit in pass protection, I think overall, before he had gone down. But do you think they could mirror that, or at least inch closer to that? Then I think a lot of fans are kind of like, oh man, this is going to be like a bottom 5 unit in the NFL. Like, speak a little bit to some of those expectations.
Yeah, I think as long as they're like a league average unit, because again, like you said, like a lot of the zone blocking stuff isn't this it's not something where we're breaking down necessarily like individual play. It's how are you going to form as a unit. And we've seen like the Rams last year. Like if you look at the Rams offensive line, like I don't think that they had like a list of names. Like Andrew Whitworth's obviously fantastic, but beyond that are really jumping off the page at you.
Right.
But when they were gelling, they looked like one of the better offensive line units in the league last year. And it's not an identical scheme. But they, it's a very similar concept where they are a very zone heavy team and you have a lot of dependency on one another. And I think that you can get by having better chemistry necessarily than having like five. You don't necessarily need to have like the 5 best players in a given unit. You just need to have that cohesion, and you have a good amount of guys who have a lot of reps together and they have the off season to figure out what they're doing with Banks, what they're going to do at the center position. But if Mcglinchey, Brunskill, and Trent Williams come back, those are 3 guys who've had a considerable amount of snaps on the 49ers offensive line within this scheme. And they've proven that they have that chemistry with one another and the ability to really take that zone blocking scheme, maximize the efficiency from it, and really generate a ton of explosive plays because of it. So, yeah, like again, I don't think it's terrible. Like the thing to watch is I haven't watched anything with Trey Lance where I think that he's like holding the ball too long, but I do definitely think that there is a propensity for younger quarterbacks, especially that are mobile, to sense a bit of pressure and then immediately bolt from the pocket and immediately look to extend plays with the legs, which is fantastic. Like if you have the ability to do it, it's awesome. But I would be really interested to see how much trust is there between Lance and between a newer offensive line, where there are going to be plays where he's going to have to hang tough in the pocket. And again, like, hey, say what you want about Jimmy Garoppolo, but there was a ton of plays where that dude got absolutely rocked and stood tall and made a throw over the middle that he needed to make. And I'd be interested to see how that dynamic plays out because, again, I don't think there's anything wrong. If you get outside the pocket and you complete a pass or you complete the same pass from inside the pocket and you're generating the same amount of yards, like, I don't care how it comes. But I do think, again, there's going to be instances where he won't have the ability to escape. And I would really be interested to see how that kind of trust develops between them going forward.
Do you think this year, out of maybe any year, that Kyle Shanahan has been the head coach, offensive play caller, designer for the San Francisco 49ers. Could this be his most important year? Which is maybe easy to say because it's again the year that we're looking straight in the face and we understand what has happened behind us. But with the kind of coaching staff shift that you've had, a lot of coaches have left for other teams, and kind of this new quarterback. Maybe there's a new implementation of more zone read, like we saw from training camp last year. Do you think Kyle Shanahan has more on his plate in regards to designing more play action, designing more zone read, kind of taking his scheme to a completely different level? Because we saw him do it last year with all the pre-snap motions, all the crazy misdirection that he runs that allows things to open up. Do you think Kyle Shanahan could get even better this year with maybe a more limited offensive line and a second-year quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. My expectation with Shanahan was that I've always kind of expected since they made the Lance pick that their offense is going to look something kind of like if you were to take a mixture of like what he did with Atlanta in 2016 and then you mix that with like Baltimore in 2019 when Lamar Jackson won his MVP. I think you're going to see a lot of power concepts and a lot of stuff in the run game that they did Baltimore, that is, that year. And I still think you're going to see a lot of that zone play action stuff that we saw in Atlanta the year Matt Ryan won his MVP. That's kind of my, very generalized outlook on it, is that it will be some kind of blend of both. Yeah, I mean, Kyle Shanahan can always get better. I think he's somebody who loves the game of football. He's constantly studying the game of football. He's somebody who's always looking to evolve his own offense. We've seen his offense look a lot differently this year than just a couple of years ago. But in terms of it being like his most important year, I think his most important year was year 3 in 2019, the year they lost the Super Bowl. I thought that year, you're coming off of 2 years where you're not in the playoffs yet. You have this franchise quarterback you traded for. I'm not saying he would have been fired if they had a bad year that year, but that was really kind of the year to prove like, hey, I'm not only a good play caller, like I'm a good head coach. They won 13-3. They almost won a Super Bowl. So
right.
I think that, obviously he has the security that's evidenced by the contract extensions he signed. But I think that, this isn't like a indictment on Kyle Shanahan if the offense sputters a bit this year. He's one of the best play callers, if not the best play caller in the NFL. Same when it comes to play designing. And, I'm obviously very, very biased because I believe that. But if I'm the 49ers, I give the guy a blank check year after year and, pretty much let him, or maybe not a blank check monetary wise. That probably isn't the best way to go about doing business. But if we're talking years.
We know the 49ers don't do business that way. They don't give out no blank checks. Just ask Deebo Samuel.
Whatever the equivalent of a blank check is, but only filling out years. If he wants to be here for 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever, the guy can stay as long as he wants because he's that good. And I think that people tend to forget that sometimes, just how fortunate they are to have somebody of that mind designing, calling plays, building the roster. Like he's really good at what he does.
He is really good at what he does, and he's really good at scheming guys open. That's one of the things that I could go get missed sometimes, is that some of these big plays that we see, a lot of that is a setup off of previous plays that he's run throughout the game, and then he gives the same look and he counters off of that, and boom, you got an 80-yard touchdown down the field to George Kittle, Deebo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk. What do you think of this team on the offensive side in the sense of big plays through the air? Do you think that's going to be an uptick from what we saw last year? Do you think it's going to be per game basis? Or is it going to be they go as Trey Lance goes kind of a situation? Or do you think there's going to be a little bit more airing out of the football, maybe throwing outside the numbers a little bit more, maybe getting the ball to Brandon Ayuk down the seam? What do you think about the big play, air yards type potential of this offense as we get ready for the 2022 season?
I mean, I definitely think the potential is there. Like we saw Lance hit that deep cross to Deebo in the Texans game. Or I think it was deep corner post was what they ran on that play. It's been so long since the season.
It's been a while.
Yeah, I think it was corner post. But yeah, they hit him on a deep play, deep downfield, and he threw it on a rope. And it was so funny because like the ball didn't ever come out of the frame. Usually when these guys are throwing the ball 30, 40 yards downfield, it does, the ball goes out of the frame, comes back in. Lance threw this ball on a rope with so much velocity that it literally just was like a low line drive that hit Deebo right in the chest 40 some odd yards down the field. So yeah, I do think there's like the potential to have more explosive like air yard plays. But I also don't think that, again, like the offense is just going to shift to them taking a bunch of deep downfield shots. Like they still have got like Deebo Samuel can catch a ball 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage and end up with the same amount of receiving yards as he would on a ball that he's catching 40 yards downfield. You know, like this offense is built for these guys to get the ball in space and generate yards after the catch with their legs, with their own shiftiness, their own vision, and all that stuff. And between Deebo and Ayuk and Kittle, like those are 3 of the best players in the entire league at doing that. So I don't think the offense is necessarily going to change again, where they're going to be taking, you know, running 4 verts and having these guys, you know, 20, 30 yards downfield. But I do think that the ability to hit those will keep defenses a bit more honest. So that's going to be a big thing to watch early, is how consistently can those deep throws be made? Can you attack a single high safety and throw outside the numbers? Like if they're able to do that, then it's going to really open up the running game. And that's where I think the 49ers really want to be at, where they're able to not have defenses put 8 in the box like we've seen the last couple of years and really dare them to throw the football. If you're daring Trey Lance to throw the football and he delivers, then you're stuck in this conundrum where it's like, oh, okay, we don't want to have this explosive rushing attack, but you have guys like Ayuk and Deebo. We've seen how fast Danny Gray is, and Kittle's no slouch either. He's a fast guy too. These guys can get downfield into the second and third level of your defense very quickly. And if you have a guy that's going to not only have the ability to make those throws, but have the willingness to take those chances, it's going to create an entirely new dynamic for this 49ers offense. So I would expect a few of those shots a game, but again, I think it's going to be more out of a more traditional under center off play action rather than just throwing Trey Lance and shotgun in an empty formation and having the, you know, 4 or 5 guys running downfield.
Right. Straight up Madden type
Exactly,
situation.
yeah. Which is what it really feels like some people are expecting with Trey Lance. Like it's almost like they're not going to change the entire philosophy of the offense.
4 verts all game, all 4 quarters, 4 verts. That's it. We're just going deep over the safety every time. I think an under-discussed position on the 49ers offense, and we'll get to the defense because I'm really excited about the defense, and I'm sure you are as well. But the tight end position. We understand George Kittle. You see George Kittle and your mind just kind of wipes blank. But I think with Kyle Shanahan, at least what we saw week 5 in Arizona and with the Texans game with Trey Lance, he seems to like to put 2 tight ends out there with Trey Lance. The 49ers brought in Troy Fumagalli. They brought in Tyler Croft. What do you kind of see with that tight end position? Is Ross Dwelly safe? Do you think Charlie Warner's a lock to make the team? How do you kind of see that competition? Because that's what it feels like. It feels like there's going to be a pretty good competition there at tight end. What do you think? And do you think Kyle uses more 2 tight end sets this season?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's just kind of in the, you know, heart of what he wants to do on offense. He wants to have, you know, looks that he's getting base defenses coming on the field. He's having the threat of the run be there. The problem with projecting it, I feel like, is that like Ross Dwelly has really good. Like I think Ross Dwelly has arguably the best hands on the entire 49ers team.
He
like,
catches everything.
He literally catches everything. He literally is. What do we call him? Like Diamond Hands Dwelly or something like that. Like we had a funny nickname I remember last year, but he literally had. I could make an argument has the best hands on the team. But I don't think he's, you know, in terms, you know, in NFL terms, I don't think he's an above average, exceptional athlete from, you know, a trait standpoint. I don't think he's the greatest blocker. I thought that Arizona game last year, you really saw how much losing George Kittle hurts in the run game. There were a lot of plays that going back and watching the tape where Dwelly misses a block or is in the wrong spot where you don't usually get that from Kittle. So you take that into consideration. Then you have Charlie Warner, who, again, I don't think is like the greatest receiver. I don't think he has the hands Dwelly has, but he's a much better blocker, in my opinion. So they both bring kind of like half the set of skills you'd ideally like to have in somebody who's going to get a lot of reps with the tight end.
Together, they're a really good tight end.
Exactly. If you could just morph them into one person, the 49ers will be fine. But I don't think science is up to date. And
it's not there yet, at least for public consumption.
Maybe we'll revisit that next offseason. We'll see how this next year goes. But I think that Tyler Croft is interesting too. Like Tyler Croft's been a solid tight end in the NFL for a while. It feels kind of like that, you know, Shanahan taking a flyer on a veteran that, you know, you cut him, you don't really lose anything, but it's somebody that could sneak on, be that third tight end, like we saw with Levine Toilolo for a couple years. You know, I thought that Michael Pruitt was going to make the team last year. Truthfully, it feels kind of like that too, where you bring in a guy who's proven, who's had a little bit of a little bit more on his plate in terms of volume of targets, reps, and, the NFL level and live action during the regular season. So, it's kind of hard to project, but I think it's going to probably be those four. I think it would be Warner, Dwelly, Kittle, and then Croft if they do end up keeping four. And if they keep three, which is much more likely, I would say, that's where it gets really interesting, because if Croft's going to push out Warner or Dwelly, you're losing a little bit of continuity with guys you have that are familiar in the building, familiar with the scheme, but you might also be getting a little bit higher floor just from somebody, again, who has a little bit more experience with a higher volume, it feels like. So, at the end of the day, as long as George Kittle's there, they're going to be fine. George Kittle's still one of the best tight ends in the league. He's one of the best players in the league. So, the depth will sort itself out. And as long as 85 is healthy, I think there's nothing to worry about.
As long as 85's rocking, ready to go, the 49ers are going to be in a good spot. And the depth behind him doesn't come as much of a big deal. But listen to Sergeant Bubbly. 78 of you guys in here, 28 likes. Smash that like button if you haven't already. Drop an SDS in the chat if you're vibing with the squad. We got Jordan Elliott with us from Niners Nation. And I would be remiss, Jordan, if we didn't get into a little bit of 49ers offseason drama here, specifically while we're on the offensive side of the football. We've talked about Trey Lance, and we will continue to talk about Trey Lance, so we don't got to get bogged down in those weeds. But I'm interested, because we haven't talked about this yet. What do you think is going to happen with Jimmy Garoppolo when training camp is in the mix? 53-man rosters are coming together. Where's Jimmy Garoppolo playing this year? Is he on the 49ers? Is he somewhere else? What do you think is going to happen?
I don't think there's any realistic scenario where Jimmy stays, because there's no way that you can pay him what he's due on his contract right now. And if I'm Jimmy Garoppolo, I'm not taking a huge pay cut to be a backup when it's been made pretty clear that that's the path they're going. And I personally, I don't think the 49ers are going to invite controversy during camp. I think that they're going to have I say that thinking about it logically, like there's no way they will, but part of me is also like, I can see Kyle Shanahan a month from now standing in front of that podium talking about iron sharpening iron and how that, Jimmy's making, he's still coming in and it's a competition and nobody's.
It was kind of our argument last year, right? Like, they're going to let Trey just rock it out. No drama. We don't want that. They're like, nah.
It feels like they've moved past all that, and it's to the point where like they know the offer. Like it's not like you can just sit here and like bluff your way into somebody giving you a better draft pick. Like if teams aren't calling the day that his shoulder's cleared and he's throwing again, just cut the guy and let him go find his own place. Like I've been saying that for months. Like you cut him, you let him go pick his new team. You let it be this like, hey, thanks for the years you gave us. Here you have total autonomy to go pick your new team. We're not going to force you to go here. Try to press you into go into a team. It's just from an optics standpoint and what you're getting in terms of just relieving the stress on everybody of having to go through another offseason with quarterback controversy. Because I don't think that got talked about enough last season. Like these guys had to answer questions about it like week after week after week. And they're still, a very good team that's pushing for a playoff spot. They were a few points away from going to a Super Bowl.
Trey Lance come in the first drive, throw the first touchdown on the year.
And, I wouldn't be surprised if there were a lot of people that weren't very happy about that. And I think that played a big part in why we saw it sort of taper down as the season went on. But I definitely think that it's just a situation where it's time to let him go. And I think that they will when he's ultimately cut. Because right now, if they cut him, they still have to give him the injury guarantee. But once he can pass a physical, he's cleared to throw. Just cut him. If he's going to go to Cleveland, if they need somebody with Deshaun Watson probably facing suspension, Carolina, I don't know how you can sit here and make an argument that Matt Corral and Sam Darnold are better than Jimmy G. And if you're getting him for nothing, even if you're giving up like a 5th or 6th round pick at this point, I think the 49ers know that the 2nd round pick or 3rd or whatever they were holding out for, it's not coming. And I don't think it's worth it to keep him on the roster. And I also don't think it's fair to him. Like you made the decision to move on from him. Let the guy go. Let him find his bearing somewhere else. Maybe he has to do what Trubisky did last year. He takes a backup job on a really good team for a year, and then you sign as a starter the year after. I don't think there's any shame in that. And I think that it would just be better if he's going to be a backup and have that role to do it outside where he gets a fresh start and you're just not dealing with the week after week where every time Trey, throws an incomplete pass or this or that happens, you got people calling for Jimmy to come back. It creates so much unneeded stress that would just be solved so easily by removing him and letting him start fresh somewhere else.
if you had to throw a percentage on it that Jimmy Garoppolo is on the roster week 1, what would your percentage be?
Like 5%. Like I think there's it would be 100 if it wasn't the 49ers, but they've proven that they will that if they believe they can get value for somebody, they're going to be very steadfast. And hey, if they hold on to Jimmy for a few weeks and they trade him before the deadline and they get a pick back for him, I couldn't fault them. But again, to me, I just think that there's no logical way you can have him be on, especially by the end of camp. Like I think another likely scenario is that they hang on to him throughout the majority of training camp, and the reports are that his shoulder's ramping up but not quite there, and then they'll release him right before the season starts because then he has less time. If you were to go to a division rival like Seattle or go to another team, you don't have the full, training camp preseason to prepare and get acclimated with a new team. And as much as, that may not be doing the best in the interest of Jimmy Garoppolo, you may not be helping him out the most. It's also a business. You have to worry about the San Francisco 49ers first and foremost. And I think if they are just going to cut him, logically that makes more sense to wait a little bit longer to do it. But I don't know, man. If they bring him back week 1, then they're inviting every single there should be no bad body language from anybody making those decisions about having to answer questions about Jimmy and why he's still here, because ultimately you're making that bet and you have to lie in it. But again, I think the front office is smart enough to know just the distraction it will cause and the benefit that you get from it. It's just not, it doesn't, it's time to move on. Like that's as simple as I can say it. It's time to move on.
Right. It becomes prohibitive at a certain standpoint where just like, what are we doing now? Like it's let the kid thrive, give him the opportunity, give him full reign. Again, you bring back Jimmy, it's it's temporary for at least how we perceive it for now. And all it's going to be doing is again get the kid looking over his shoulder for a locker room that told everyone that Jimmy Garoppolo is their leader and their quarterback. And it just, I'm with you. I agree. 5% seems reasonable because it is the 49ers. D Ford is still on the roster. We saw how long they held on to Jalen Hurd. We've seen similar instances before, so we understand that they play the long game, it feels like. In a lot of instances, they will try to hold on to a player if they believe there's value there. So I agree. 5%. Can't say 95%. Can't say it's 100% he's gone just because he's an asset. He's a quarterback. They believe he's a starting caliber quarterback in this league. There's value there. Whether fans believe there's value there is value there. So we'll see. Percentage chance he gets traded versus cut. What would you kind of put those two at?
I mean, probably like 25-7. Like, I think it's more likely he gets cut than traded, but you never know. Like, a team could have, unfortunately, injuries happen all the time during training camp. They might have a position where their quarterback goes down for a while and they feel like they're a team that can contend. And again, say what you want about Jimmy Garoppolo, but he's been the quarterback on a team that's been very close to winning 2 Super Bowls. And while he may not be the driving force behind that, he's shown he's at least capable of making plays and contributing to a team that can compete. So I don't think the 49ers are going to get, like that first round haul that the the Eagles got for Sam Bradford a few years ago, like 2016.
I think that ship has sailed.
Yeah, like I don't think that's happening. But hey, if a team calls up and they're super desperate, all of a sudden the 49ers go from having 0 leverage to all the leverage. Like, yeah, there's a chance that could still happen. There's a chance a team could get into camp. Their quarterback looks terrible. The unfortunate reality is you'd like to think that every decision that gets made by an NFL team is, with the best interest of the franchise now and going forward. But a lot of times there's very selfish reasoning behind a lot of these moves. And hey, if you have a GM or a coach who's on the hot seat and their quarterback looks terrible during camp and in the preseason, you might take a swing on Jimmy Garoppolo because you might have to, win 8, 9, 10 games this year to keep your job. So I definitely think there's scenarios like that can pop up. Again, that's where like Carolina, I don't think Carolina is dead at all because, I haven't watched nearly enough Matt Corral to definitively say I don't think he's going to be a good NFL quarterback. But I definitely haven't seen anything that would make me think from day one he's going to, just wow, the coaching staff and have guys like Brian Burns and Jeremy Chin on the other side of the ball in practice, really, oh man, this guy's kicking our ass every day. Yeah, I don't think that's happening. And I definitely don't think Sam Darnold's doing it. So you might get to a point where it's like, hey, Matt Rule's kind of on the hot seat. Like maybe him in the front office that's also on the hot seat pushes for, hey, we'll give you a 5th. You give us Jimmy. You get something instead of nothing, and we get a guy that might elevate our team to where we need to be. So, the possibilities there, but I do think that it's more likely that it goes to it's more likely that it goes to cut than a trade.
Yeah. A lot of people feel that way. It's going to be the market dictates what's going to happen. It's going to be interesting. the Deshaun Watson news is seemingly looming about any day now. So I wouldn't be surprised if we hear something maybe tomorrow or Monday, right at the beginning of the news cycle. That will carry the news throughout the week. And then there will be that whole storm that follows. Maybe some movement. Maybe you hear Jimmy's throwing. We'll find out. But as we continue to get going here, Joshua wants to know where to get the hat. Oh, well, you already know the vibes. Go to residency.com. Use the promo code DSF Niners. We got your back. But quickly, I need a percentage chance Deebo Samuel signs his contract extension before week 1.
100.
Boom. Happens fast.
It's
any analysis need to be given on that anymore? Or do we kind of feel like we feel pretty comfortable with where it's headed?
I don't think Deebo Samuel is going to step on the field until he gets his extension, and I also don't think he's going to incur the amount of fines that come based on the CBA, which really is like something that doesn't get talked about enough. That the way the CBA is set up, you really can't hold out the way you used to. Players don't really have the same kind of leverage they did once upon a time. And I also think the 49ers know at the end of the day, like, yeah, well, you may have the leverage. You also need to take care of the players that are putting you in positions to be the great team you are. And I think Deebo has, as much of a right to that payday as anybody else on the team. So I think they'll come to some common ground. And we know the 49ers have their whole thing where it's like, hey, if you come up and you meet us halfway and you show you're willing to come to camp and set an example, we'll get you taken care of. They did the same thing with Kittle where it didn't really get done till later in the offseason. Same thing with Fred Warner. I don't expect Deebo to be any different. And I'd be absolutely shocked given the fact that I don't think the Jets trade offer was necessarily great. But if they were ever going to replace Deebo and come to a point where they weren't willing to get it done no matter what, you have to think that getting a guy like Garrett Wilson or having that top 10 pick would have been the time they make that move. And the fact that they didn't makes me believe that they're just going to get the deal done no matter what it takes. And I think that this isn't a situation where Deebo necessarily is just like, I want out. And we heard the report that he still hasn't rescinded his trade offer or his trade request, but that doesn't mean that every day he's texting John Lynch, get me out of here, get me out of here. He might just not, he could be doing his own thing in the offseason. And from a business standpoint, it makes sense. You give up the trade request, then you have to come out and ask for another one again if you do. And it's just from a leverage standpoint, it would have made no sense to do that anyway. So I think it'll get done. I think that, he just wants to get paid. And I don't blame the guy. The NFL careers are short. And when you're playing like Deebo Samuel, your risk of serious injury is obviously much greater. And I think the second he gets the guaranteed money, you're going to see a much different outlook from him. And I think that it's never been I don't want to play for the San Francisco 49ers as much as it's like, I want to be compensated properly for playing for the San Francisco 49ers. And I think that will end up. And again, that's just my speculation. I have no idea. I don't want to act like I know what Deebo Samuel's thinking or what his motivations are. But I would just guess that he's somebody who has earned a payday and feels a certain way, and rightfully so, that I am, pay me what I'm worth. And I think that ultimately the 49ers know what he's worth and they'll get it done.
100%. I think we both expect Deebo Samuel to be playing on a brand new contract heading into this year. I feel like it would produce the best outcomes for everyone involved, the locker room, Deebo Samuel himself, and the 49ers. You don't want your players to be just so beside themselves. I mean, clearly he's already requested a trade, and we saw how that situation played out. And if you force him to play on the last year of his rookie deal, I see it as, okay, it's like sign and franchise and trade time, which I don't think anyone wants. But hopefully it doesn't even come close to that. Deebo Samuel gets signed and is on the field for week 1, because when we look at the offense, we're going to need those types of weapons. But kind of going to the defensive side, I'm really excited about this group led by D'Amico Ryans. You remember, Jordan, we were sitting there watching D'Amico just scheme it up with all the different blitz packages, with all the exotic looks that he was showing in install period last year's training camp. Do you think now with this year, he's going to be more attacking versus reactive based on personnel that he has available to him? And we could actually see a little bit of a scheme shift and a little bit more aggressive in D'Amico Ryans in the game that he calls from a defensive side of things.
I think ultimately what it comes down to is how healthy are the cornerbacks, because I think obviously getting Travarius Ward was a big boost for that unit. I think that Emmanuel Mosley is very good, and obviously Jason Verrett, if he can stay healthy, he's proven he's one of the better cornerbacks in the NFL still. So if you have those three guys and they're still healthy and playing at the high level that they've shown that they are capable of doing, I think, yeah, you will see a much more aggressive D'Amico Ryans. I think you will see a lot more of those exotic pressures and a lot of different fronts and disguised coverages and things like that. Because I think the thing at the end of the day is it's so funny that, like, I always hear people complaining about how bad their secondary is. And this isn't just 49ers fans. It's, other teams, how bad the secondary is or how bad their team is in pass coverage. Like, it's really hard to defend NFL wide receivers in space in the modern NFL, the way that the game has changed and the way the rules are set up. So
100.
like, it's wild to me that people just like watched the 49ers last year and not only felt that way, but didn't really take into context that it was a revolving door at the position and that they had so many injuries and different guys coming in that, what exactly were you expecting is kind of where I'm coming from. Because again, even for the guys who were starters getting top flight money, it's really hard to stay in front of NFL receivers. And when you're getting guys off the street in week 3, week 2, whenever, Josh Norman came in, Drake Kirkpatrick and these guys, you have a rookie and Ambry Thomas getting a ton of reps. Like, it's not easy to cover in the NFL. And there's a reason why these guys are still available.
And if you don't have a pass rush, well, good luck.
Exactly. And I think that, the way that the 49ers will be set up this year, the way that they address the secondary, I expect D'Amico Ryans to take a few more chances. But it just, again, points to how great he was last season, given the fact that they didn't really have a cornerback position that had any consistency because of the injuries and because of the way they had to rotate guys in and out, and to still produce a top 5 defense in your first year as a defensive coordinator. Like, that's just mind-boggling to me. It's absolutely insane. And again, it points to how good D'Amico Ryans is. So it really kind of depends on the corners, because I think the front seven is going to be, not the exact same, but the majority of that core is coming back. And I don't think a ton has changed. Obviously, losing Jaquiski Tartt hurts a ton because you don't really know what you have, whether it's Talanoa Hufanga or George Odom. You know what you have in Jimmy Ward. He's fantastic. He's one of the best safeties in the NFL. But you lose 7 years of continuity, and whatever people's opinions may be, there's a reason why for 7 years nobody beat out Jimmy Ward or Jaquiski Tartt, and those guys were both the starting safeties for the last 7 seasons. It's the better part of a decade, and that's an eternity in the NFL. So that's my only real concern right now, is if the some of the stuff that they were able to do because Tartt was so big, he was able to run fit so well, and he was able to get up in the box and play the way he could, while also shading the deep third of the field, being the single high safety. Like, I'm not saying Hufanga or Odom can't do it. We just don't really know yet. But I do expect them to be a bit more aggressive just based on how they address the outside, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, makes total sense. Coach showed up in the chat showing love for his boy, Woden.
My guy.
Love. Corey, I'm gonna go out on a limb and assume this is some satire here. He says the Chats just got 5 first-round picks for Rudy Gobert. Do you think we can get something similar for Jimmy Garoppolo? Jordan?
I'll tell you what, Danny Ainge is just robbing teams year after year after year. He did it with the Celtics. He's doing it in Utah now. That guy might be the greatest finesser I have ever seen in a general manager position. When it comes to just acquisitions with other teams, I've never seen anything like it. Jimmy Garoppolo is a proven winner. He's obviously gotten to a little bit higher stage than Rudy Gobert has. But is Jimmy the rim protector that Gobert is? That's where I have some concerns. Gobert does have a couple defensive players of the year. Jimmy has none. So I do think that there is a little bit of drop-off when it comes to accolades. But I think maybe if you swap it. So they got 5 firsts for Rudy. I think the 49ers can get 1 5th for Jimmy. So same words and letters, just in a different order. And I think, yeah.
I like how you did that. That works out pretty well, and it's pretty accurate too. So we took that and we actually made it work with some actual viable logic. Well, exactly, perfectly said. With that one, Jordan, beautiful. But what are your expectations for this defensive line? I know you were the leader of the DJ Jones hive. Obviously, DJ Jones had a phenomenal year. He had a phenomenal campaign with his time with the 49ers. Now finds himself in Denver. But, you get Drake Jackson in the draft. Javon Kinlaw seemingly healthy. You add Hassan Ridgeway. Kevin Givens is stepping into, I think, a big year. He's going to be, I think, 24, 25 years old, still relatively young. Nick Bosa not having to rehab this offseason. Samson Ebukam, Charles Omenihu, Kamoko Ture. What are your expectations? Can't forget Jordan Willis, last year training camp MVP. What do you kind of what are your kind of expectations for the vaunted defensive line group for the San Francisco 49ers?
I still think they're going to be one of the best, if not the best unit in the entire NFL. They are absolutely loaded with not only like good players, but like bona fide studs. Like you have Nick Bosa, obviously, who's one of the best edge rushers in football. You have Eric Armstead, who from the interior is one of the best pass rushers in
I'd
the
even
entire
name
NFL.
Eric.
Yeah,
How dare I?
He's just he's another guy who doesn't get enough credit for what he does. Samson Ebukam last year took a huge step forward in the second half of that season. And once he got comfortable playing in a new role for the first time ever in his NFL career, he's completely changing scheme. He's completely changing where he's lining up in the field, all his responsibilities. And I thought the more and more reps he got, the better he got, which is a completely fair, order of operations when it comes to, developing. I just think that this unit is going to be like, yes, losing DJ Jones sucks. So like right now I'm working on a little thing where I'm doing like the 10 most impressive individual performances from the last season on Niners.
Who just came out today, right?
Charles Omenihu against Dallas. Charles Omenihu had six pressures, 2 sacks, and a forced fumble against Dallas.
Over the place.
After Nick Bosa went out and did it against a very good Cowboys defensive line, and it was in Dallas. It's his home state, like all that. My whole list is that there's external factors that I'm weighing too. So it was 10 was it was 10. 10 was, how am I blanking on this, dude? I'm so sorry. I know 9 was Azeez Al-Shaair. God, he's annoying me that I'll double check. I can't believe I'm forgetting who 10 was. But the point of this is, while I'm doing this, I'm going back and I'm watching all these games from last year. I'm rewatching the coaches film and all this stuff. And the amount of plays that DJ Jones is making, it is absolutely insane. And I just remembered it was Trent Williams against the Bengals. He had like 45 reps in pass protection, only allowed 1 pressure against a really good Bengals defensive line. But I think that the way that they're set up now, they can absorb the loss of a DJ Jones, which is, again, is going to be very difficult because of how good of a player he is and just the amount of just somebody that never got their due. And I'm not saying that he was, hated or got a ton of, but he just did so much that didn't really show up in a traditional box score. So I think when people go back and they review some of these games, if you're not watching every single snap, you tend to lose sight of just how impactful he is. But man, Javon Kinlaw is going to be an absolute stud. I've felt that way pretty soon after they drafted him. To me, it was always a situation where he had so much size and raw athletic talent. He just needed some reps. Needed to get a little bit better when it comes to, hand placement, adding a little bit of a, variety to his pass. Exactly. A little bit of polish, which is fair for anybody. I don't care how high you get drafted, whether you're the first pick or the last pick in a draft. You're going to need some time to acclimate. And unfortunately, due to some unfortunate injuries, he's been robbed of a couple full seasons worth of development. But I think that he's back. He says the knee feels as good as ever. And he's somebody that has so much raw potential that when you add that in with the dedication he has to get better, you have a guy that could not only be a very good starter, like I think he has the ability to be a perennial Pro Bowl player on the interior. And I'm not going to sit here and say that they're going to immediately get better than when they were with DJ Jones, because DJ Jones is a very good player, but they have the potential 2 to 3 years from now where Kinlaw is exceeding the very high bar that DJ Jones had set. So I think they're in a good spot.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it. I'm over here actually looking on your Twitter, and you actually had posted the clip, I believe, and I could even pull it up here. This is the one that you were doing for Charles Omenihu, right? That you were just talking about. But again, you get a nice just idea of the way they can collapse the pocket, force him to step up, and just get after the quarterback. So I'm really, really excited about that. Coach says the D-line is loaded. And he also's got a question for us. He says, do you think Sam E might get cut as a cap casualty? Is Sam E Sam Ehlinger?
Ebukam. Samson Ebukam.
Oh, I was like, who's Sam E? That makes sense. We have a lot of bodies in that group. Let's be honest. We can't keep them all. Sammy's Ebukam's money can keep multiple guys a possible trade, but also too, if you're getting rid, and I'll just make this point, and then you can take over. But if they're getting rid of Jimmy Garoppolo, a ton of money opens up, at least for this year. So does Samson Ebukam's money become an issue this season? I don't know. What do you think about that? I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. I would not get rid of Samson Ebukam. Again, going back and watching some of these games and like watching the thing with Ebukam is that he is so physically gifted that I think he's one of those guys where you're going to generate a few sacks, a handful of pressures every year, where even if the opposing offensive line's technique is good, they're in a good spot, their base is set, you're so physically overpowering and you have such an ability to get below the pad level and drive them back. You're creating havoc. And like there was a play against Tennessee I posted like a week ago, and he has two guys blocking him, and he ends up still getting in the backfield and sacking Ryan Tannehill. Like he's sitting there, he's two blockers engaging him, splits him down the middle. Yeah, it's this one right here, and ends up bringing him down. I really like Samson Ebukam. I think that it's like $8 million, I think, is his cap hit right now.
Yeah,
around that. I think he's worth it personally. And I think, again, it gives you the luxury of maybe he's this year, you have a rotation, and then next year when he puts up 11 sacks or something crazy because Chris Kosaric just has the magic touch, and Ebukam and him is a great marriage in terms of getting the most out of a guy. And he can't afford to pay him next year. Maybe then you have a guy like Drake Jackson where, hey, he's on year 2 of a rookie deal. You can slide him in, but you're not putting the immense pressure of having to have that burden of being the main guy opposite Bosa from day one. And again, I think Ebukam is going to be a really good player. I think the 49ers bet on his physical ability. I think they bet on his intangibles. And I think the reason why they structured the deal the way they did, backloading it, was, hey, if he comes in and it's just not a fit, he's just somebody, he was a stand-up outside linebacker in a 3-4. He's not doing as well as we would have projected with his hand in the dirt in the 4-3. We can cut him and we'll move on and we'll eat some dead money. But I think they're at a point now where they liked what they saw. Again, he had a fantastic last like 8 or 9 weeks of the season. And I think the 49ers are more than comfortable keeping that cap hit. So just like you mentioned, I don't think this is a situation where it's deterring them from making any other moves. Like we're in July, you know what I mean? Like it's at the point now where there's not money that's so tied up that it's preventing them from doing anything that's going to really put them over the top. And I think by taking Samson Ebukam off your team, you make your team immediately weaker with no real recourse to improve immediately after. Like there's no corresponding move where you may be losing for a second, but you're then upgrading over where you were before. That's not going to happen this late in the offseason, I think.
Yeah, and it feels like Ebukam will really have a strong role in kind of that turbo package where he might not play as heavy base down. That might be more Omenihu, maybe Teray. Maybe you get a little bit of Drake Jackson sprinkled in, but it does feel like when you look at the primary turbo NASCAR, whatever package that is when you're rushing the passer, it feels like Samson kind of has that role locked in, especially with the way he developed last year. It does seem like he's got a nice role, and kind of like you talked about, Jordan, like if there was any cap concerns or cap constraints, I think that would have been figured out by now, and they would have made that decision already rather than delaying it. Because if they let him go now, again, he's free to sign wherever he wants. He could go up to Seattle. We could go do those types of things. I think they like him inside that building. I don't think they look at him as, just a huge cap hamstring in a sense where they can't make moves. And I do think if you get rid of Jimmy, then you get a whole bunch of money that clears up. So I think he's here to stay. But I think to your point, maybe next year is where they reevaluate and have some other conversations about that. Coach says, okay, the next question. Then who do you feel let me restart this. Then who do we feel okay letting go? Because we can't keep all them big boys up front. It's math, bro. Hey, I'm admittedly not good at math, so I'll let you take this one. Who gets cut? Who finds themselves on the chopping block? Because I believe you might have a better firm answer on this, but I think there's 15 defensive tackles, defensive ends on the roster right now. What do they typically keep? 10, 11?
Yeah, I think they're going to keep 11. So let's go through this, right? Nick Bosa, he's not going anywhere. That's one. Kinlaw, not going anywhere. That's 2. Armstead, 3. Beyond that, Drake Jackson would be 4. He'd be the other guy that's like almost guaranteed not to go anywhere. Beyond that, sure, hypothetically, you could cut anybody, but if this is just based on my projection, I don't think it's going to be Willis. That's 5. I don't think it'll be Ebukam. That's 6. I don't think it's going to be Ridgeway. That's 7. I don't think it'll be Givens. That's 8. I don't think it will be Toure. That's 9. I don't think it'll be Amenahue. And I don't think it'll be Maurice Hurst.
So Maurice Hurst, sleeper alert.
That leaves you kind of with like D Ford, I think will be a cut. Alex Barrett probably cut. Kalia Davis, Atkins, those are late round picks. Maybe they're practice squad guys. I don't think they make the final 53. So the real name that kind of stands out amongst that group that I don't think would make it would be Carrie Hyder. And I just personally think that it's just too deep, and they have so many other guys from an edge standpoint that give them a little bit higher upside. I know Hyder is a Koceret guy. They have a ton of history. He had a good season for the 49ers a couple of years ago. I just think the athletic upside of the other players would be a greater thing to bet your future on if I was the 49ers. And I think that you can kind of sign a guy similar to a Hyder later on in the season, whereas I think some of these other guys like a Kamiko Toure, a Willis, they have such good athletic traits that I think it's a little bit harder to maybe find a player like that. So again, it's tough, but as of now, I would say Hyder is probably the biggest name that would be one of the ones left out.
Yeah, and let's not forget either, like, to your point, Carrie Hyder had a really good season in 2020 for the San Francisco 49ers, like we know, but he's not a spring chicken anymore. He's 31 years old. He's getting up there in age, and when you look at the profile, 6'2", 275 pounds, if he loses a step, then he might not be as great of an option as at least is kind of burned into our memories from that 2020 season where he led the 49ers in sacks. And I agree with Jordan. I would like to see the potential from Toure and what he can be as a 26-year-old, 6'5", just more body beautiful at this point and younger. I admittedly am an ageist, so this is where that ageism comes into play. I look at the 31-year-old, I look at the 26-year-old. I feel like I can get more out of Kamoko than I can out of Hyder. So I kind of agree with you in that sentiment, is that it does feel like, though, Carey will be on the potential chopping block, maybe Toure, because he signed on a modest 1-year deal. But I pretty much agree with that list. I don't think there's really anyone else that snuck through that would be, again, D Ford's going to get cut most likely, or at least that's what Shanahan has talked about. And do you think Kalia Davis winds up on PUP, or do you think it's a cut and add to practice squad? Same thing with guys like Kevin Atkins, undrafted free agents. Typically how it goes. Do you see those guys just being practice squad guys at this point?
Yeah, I don't see how either makes. I mean, hey, I've been wrong before. Maybe one of them comes into camp that's one of these guys we're not expecting and just lights it up, and they have no choice but to keep him on. But as of now, like it's too talented. And again, it's not an indictment on a player for not making it as undrafted free agent their first year. That's how good this 49ers roster is. Don't let whatever PFF lists and graphics they're throwing out. I saw one yesterday where like they weren't even listed as one of the top 10 rosters in the NFL, which is an absolute joke,
bro.
Like, I don't like attacking other people for their opinions or whatever, but I just don't know how you could ever come to that opinion. I would love to hear the reasoning behind it. And I didn't see if there was like a written body of work attached to it. If there is, I'll try and check it out. But I don't know how you could come to that conclusion that the 49ers aren't one of the 10 best rosters in the NFL. So for those of us who are acutely aware that they are, I think it's just, very hard to get a spot on this 53-man roster. It just doesn't mean that you're not going to be a good NFL player because year one you couldn't get on one of the better rosters in the entire league. And I think the way that the practice squad is set up now, you do have a chance to kind of develop guys for a little bit. Hey, we've seen some guys play on that practice squad and ended up making a big impact for the 49ers going forward. They've shown a really good ability to take these undrafted guys in, develop them for a little bit, and have them step up at the highest level on the final, 53-man roster, 46 on game day and all that stuff.
Absolutely. That list was pretty wild. Like, I get it. It is what it is.
They had the Chargers like number 3 or something like that, which to me was like, wow. And I love Justin Herbert. I love Derwin James. I think they have a very good team, but like the 3rd best roster in the NFL.
I think they have a good offensive line. I think they added Zion Johnson. You got Slater. I like their O-line. But yeah, a little rich for my taste. Shout out the homie Jesse Wade. Also got a shout out the wifey who is typically watching. We don't really know, but he says, appreciate you guys always speaking facts without emotion. It's not easy to do. We get emotional sometimes. I think more so me, but definitely Jordan comes with the facts always. And we do appreciate that, Jesse. We really do. But as we get into kind of wrapping this up, are there any rookies that you are particularly honed in on as we head into training camp that you would like to learn more about or have expectations for as we get we're less than a month away from training camp?
Yeah, I wrote about it like a month ago or so. If you go to Niners Nation, my author page, it should be there on like the most recent one. But Jordan Mason, not Jordan Davis, Jordan Mason from Georgia Tech. Not Jordan Davis from Georgia. Same state, different people. Jordan Mason from Georgia Tech is somebody who I think is going to be a fantastic player within the scheme. I think he's somebody who's going to get one of the final spots in that running back room. And I think he's somebody who's going to have a pretty significant impact going forward. So he's definitely the guy that I'm keeping an eye on because, hey, Drake Jackson, yeah, it'll be fun to see what he can do. I was ecstatic for that pick. I was sitting there in the media room in Vegas during the draft. Like, there's no way the 49ers can't take Drake Jackson. It's just like right there for the taking. This team loves taking defensive linemen. This guy's a first-round talent. He's there at the back end of the second. They have to take him. I thought it was a great pick. Danny Gray, TDP, Nick Zakel, Burford. Like, there's a ton of guys I'm excited to see. But Jordan Mason, I think, has the ability to come in. Because, again, on top of the player being very good, I think the opportunity is there where we've seen running backs have the ability to make an impact a little bit earlier than maybe other positions in the NFL right out the gate from day one. So Jordan Mason is my guy. And I'm just going to say it like 5 times. Jordan Mason. Like, remember that name, because a couple months from now, when he's getting the bulk of the carries or he's getting a large volume within a game, remember that, we had this discussion today, everybody. You guys were the here on the founding of the Jordan Mason Hive.
And you can also see it right here on the screen. He wrote this on May 18th, right? This has been from the beginning. So again, you can find Jordan's stuff. Was this an interview that you did with the head coach?
Head coach Jeff Collins, head ball coach, Georgia Tech. It was a fantastic discussion. I really appreciate him giving me some time. Yeah, it was good. I got some good stuff from him on Jordan Mason.
Absolutely. And we do have some Jordan Mason hivers in this chat. So make sure you go check out Jordan's article on Niner Nation and peep that, because you're going to get good insight there. And when Jordan does these, because I read the one with Nick Zakel's offensive line coach, fire information comes out of it. So make sure you go check that out. Jesse says, now question, and thank you, Jesse, for the super chat. Really do appreciate that. He says, real quick, how do you see the running back room unfolding? So it's kind of perfect transition, because just talking about Jordan Mason. So if Jordan Mason's coming out, that means, he has a coming out party here in training camp. There's a good chance he makes it onto the active roster. Who gets cut in that scenario? I think you're muted again.
I don't know if this is like a hot take at this point, but honestly, I would expect Chris Irvin to be the odd man out. I just think that if it's going to be anybody, I think it would be him. I don't think you cut TDP. I would not cut Jeff Wilson. Jeff Wilson's proven to be too valuable when he's healthy.
And you got him on such a good
deal. Yeah. Elijah Mitchell had a great year last year. Kyle Juszczyk. So I think they're going to keep 5 total. So I think they'll have 4 running backs, and then Kyle Juszczyk being the 5th technically. So I'd expect it to be Mitchell, Jeff Wilson, TDP, and Jordan Mason would be my guess. But hey, I've been wrong before. I've been wrong again. But I just don't think that there's a way you can keep 5 running backs and Kyle Juszczyk. I don't think there's any way to justify 6.
I think they might carry one extra offensive lineman this year, just with if they're really going in. You drafted Burford, you drafted Zakel, 4th, 6th. You still have Jalen Moore, who you drafted. They spent 5th round draft capital on him. Colton McKivitz is a guy I think proved his worth at the end of the year. They cut him last year. I don't know if you want to cut him again. So they might keep an extra offensive lineman. Maybe they only keep 2 quarterbacks. I know they've kept 3 historically when it was Jimmy, Beathard, and Mullins, and they had all started games at one point in their career. Maybe they only keep 2, and they keep an extra offensive lineman. But I don't know if the running back position, because it's tough, though, because also we look through the tenure of Kyle Shanahan's career. The running backs go down like clockwork in regards to injury. So who knows? Maybe they keep more, but I kind of agree with you. It feels like it's going to be 4 running backs, Kyle Juszczyk, and maybe they supplement other positions on the roster. So Trey Sermon is the guy. I think Hasty will be the odd man out, obviously, but you still leave room for one more, right? That if Jordan Mason is making it, that really does feel like that's where the main competition for Jordan Mason is. It's knocking down Hasty first, because for what it's worth, Hasty has been that 3rd down back. There has been a role within this offense that has been that kind of who's out there on the field in 3rd down and pass blocking situations and or kind of getting out in the flat or whatever. But I don't think he's done just a phenomenal job where it's like, oh, this is Hasty's job. Like Jordan Mason is kind of a bigger back, but has ability to be a pass catcher out of the backfield as well. So he can play that role, and that bigger body can aid him in pass protection as well. So it kind of feels like if Jordan Mason is going to be that guy, he's going to hop over Hasty. But then I do kind of agree with you that he's competing against Trey Sermon for that last spot, because we saw what happened last year. Trey Sermon wasn't even suited up for the first game of the year. He got hurt, just never really fell into the rotation at all. He's playing special teams by the end of the year. We saw the one game against Green Bay, but he left a lot of yards on the field. Big year for Trey Sermon, right? So especially with Jordan Mason, new running back coach. You don't have Bobby Turner there anymore, who might have been a champion for Trey Sermon in the draft, potentially. You now got Coach Lynn. Spicy, though. I like it. Going to be a lot. That's why I can't wait to get to training camp, because remember last year when we were at training camp, Trey Sermon was the number 1. He was lining up in 11 on 11 before Raheem Mostert. So he's on. It does feel like Trey Sermon's on shaky ground. So we'll continue to see how that all plays out. But great question there, Jesse. Really do appreciate it.
You need to factor into, I would say real quick, the special team stuff is really important. That's one thing that I wanted to, you touched on. Jeff Wilson obviously has experience doing it. I think that one thing with Jordan Mason, so that's one thing I talked about with Jeff Collins, who was his head coach at Georgia Tech. And I asked Coach Collins, I was like, well, with the special team stuff, was it more so that you guys just didn't want, a heavy burden on his shoulder with that? Are you trying to keep him healthy for the offense? You wanted him just having those reps on the field. And he said that during practice, he was one of the better special teams players they've had, one of the most willing special teams players that they've had. And somebody that when he was asked to do so, obviously did the same thing in game action. So he's somebody that took great pride. He said he took great pride in being very good on special teams. And that's something that was as important to him as what he was doing as a ball carrier on the offensive side of the ball. So we'll see how it goes. And I also think, too, when you look at the 49ers, yeah, sure, they invested a 3rd-round pick in the Trey Sermon. I wasn't a really big fan of the pick at the time, and it wasn't just Trey Sermon as the individual. It was just a running back there. I was kind of like, eh. And the fact
it was more of the philosophy behind it.
Yeah, and they took another running back. they took another running back in the third round. Let's be honest. If they felt that great about Trey Sermon, they probably don't take TDP where they take TDP. And
they're
we've
kind of
also
similar running styles in a sense.
And we've seen before in the past too, like, hey, they missed on Joe Williams. He didn't have a single snap in the NFL in a regular season game. They cut him a year later. Like, this team, for as much as people want to harp on the misses, they've also shown that, hey, if it's not working out, we don't think this guy is going to stick on our roster. We're going to cut our losses and move on rather than wait till it's too late and just hang on to a guy. Like, I don't think there's any roster politics into like keeping Trey Sermon from an optics standpoint. Like, sure, you might have one day where people are like, hey, third round running back they drafted last year is gone, but it's not something that's going to like hang over them. And I think at this point, like, I think that Jordan Mason is somebody that, like, I think he has a real shot to push Sermon for that job. I'm not saying it's a guarantee. I'm not saying that he absolutely will, but just from my point of view, I think there's a very strong chance of it happening.
Absolutely. So that's going to be one of the big competitions that we see in camp. Maybe we do another episode next week, Jordan, where we talk about biggest camp battles and we can get more primed as we get closer to training camp. But I do appreciate your time, man. It's good to see you. You could tell the chat was hyped to get the GOAT Jordan Elliott back on the stream. Again, football is going to be back here sooner than later, so maybe we get picked up a little bit more. But tell the good people here where to find more Jordan Elliott content.
You can go to my Twitter right now. I'll be honest, it's not as much football stuff. It's kind of still me just victory lapping the Warriors winning the title. NHL draft.
Hey, Looney back today.
Yeah, Looney, hey, big
right?
Looney, man. Yeah,
Let's
it's a big
playoff
big
Loon.
It's a lot of Warrior stuff right now. It'll be a lot of Shark stuff in a few days when the NHL draft happens. But if you're looking for strictly football stuff, I'm trying to be good about still getting some stuff out. But I'll be honest, this is kind of my like pseudo, I don't say vacation time because I'm still working, but it's just kind of
like getting his Zen on, just
preparing. Yeah,
it's gonna be a big year ahead of us.
Yeah, I'm like grinding tape like in a leisurely sense. Like, I'm still watching game film, I'm still up late writing and stuff. I'm just not doing it like it's it's the difference of practicing. It's like I'm practicing on game week. I'm out here, it's like
it's your OTAs essentially.
I'm doing that stuff. Like, yeah, Trey Lance with the guys in the beach in LA, they're running routes and throwing them. That's the mode I'm in right now. Like, I'm still getting my reps in, but it's just in a much more relaxed setting. So I'll try to be good about it. But yeah, like I said, I expect a lot of Warrior stuff. I'm not done victory lapping that title because a lot of people, gave me a very hard time for the last couple seasons. So I will be milking every ounce of this Warriors championship that I can. So, we
can't forget that your old handle was Splash Cousin too.
Yeah,
legendary.
My first piece of published work ever was about how the Warriors won the Wiggins trade in like 2020.
And that became so correct.
Hey man, I'm just saying, I'm not saying I know ball, but the streets are saying that I know ball. That's what I've heard. That's what the word is around town. But yeah, I just, I don't want people to be like, oh, let me follow for football stuff. And then they just see me like posting Andrew Wiggins, posterizing people and like Javon Looney grabbing rebounds. But you can find me there. You can find me on Niners Nation. I am doing a series right now over the next couple of weeks where I'm doing the 10 most impressive performances from an individual. It's kind of fun. I think as we get farther down the list, there might be a couple that people didn't expect. I'm limiting it to one performance per player because some of these guys were so good week after week that I wouldn't be able to highlight 10 total players. So as of now, it's been Amenahue, Al-Shaair, and Trent Williams. Got some good stuff coming forward as well. So stay tuned for that. But yeah, just vibing until training camp starts in a couple weeks. So I'm trying to enjoy the next couple weeks in peace before it really ramps up and I'm back on the grind, man. Yeah,
absolutely. It's going to be here before we know it. Only a couple more weeks again until training camp. For me, can't get here fast enough because I can't wait to get out there, get the boys back out on the field. And I'm talking about me, you, Aponte, back out thriving. Can't wait. And again, to see everyone else who's going to be attending training camp. It's going to be a lot of fun. But again, Jordan, thank you so much. Make sure you follow my guy at J. Lee Elliott. Read his work on Niners Nation. And appreciate everyone who is chiming in the chat. This was a fun one. My guy always brings fire insight. Make sure you smash that like button on your way out. Hit that sub button if you haven't. You already know the vibes. But appreciate everyone. We're out of here. Until next week, you guys have a great weekend.